Stop for a moment and honestly look at your life. The decisions you make, the paths you choose, the people you keep close, the dreams you pursue. Does all of this really come from you? Or is there, deep down, something making those decisions for you? I'm not talking about external influences like family, society, or culture. I'm talking about something internal, intimate, silent, something that lives within your own mind. Carl Jung believed that much of what we call the self is, in fact, an illusion, a facade. Most of our lives are driven not by the conscious part, the one that is here now listening to my words, but by a set of unconscious forces that act like automatic programs. And the most unsettling part, these programs were not created to set you free. They were shaped to keep you safe, but safe in the sense of trapped, limited, confined in patterns you don't even notice. Imagine that within you exist small psychological entities, subpersonalities that observe the world, decide how you should act, and, when you least expect it, take control. Jung called them autonomous complexes. They don't ask for your permission. They don't inquire if you want to react with fear, anger, or submission. They simply act. And when they realize you are trying to change, they work even harder to keep you exactly where you are. Think about how many times you've said, "I don't know why I did that," or "that wasn't me at that moment." Think about the opportunities you let slip by, the conversations you avoided, the emotional outbursts that later embarrassed you. They weren't just mistakes or bad moments. They were signs that you were being driven by something that is not under your conscious control. And this is where the subject gets even darker. Jung realized that these forces do not act in isolation. They feed off each other, strengthen one another, and create a cycle that is almost impossible to break. He called this psychological possession, a state in which you live believing you are in control, while in reality, you are just a passenger, being carried by deep and ancient fears that shape every step you take. These fears are not the kind you feel when watching a horror movie or when facing real danger. They are subtler, more ingrained. They are invisible forces that shape your behavior, your choices, and even your own identity. Jung identified 3 of these fears as central, and understanding each of them is like finding the keys to the cell in which you live without knowing. Today, we will dive into these 3 fears. But don't expect a light conversation. Once you see what lies behind your behavior, there will be no going back to the comfortable ignorance you've lived in until now. It's like turning on the light in a room you've kept locked your whole life. You may not like what you find, but you can no longer pretend it's not there. Are you ready to truly face yourself? Are you ready to discover who or what really controls your life? Because after hearing what Jung has to reveal, the responsibility will be yours, and only yours, to decide whether to continue being guided by these forces or to finally take control of your own destiny. To understand how the fears Jung spoke of manifest, we first need to open a dark chapter of the human psyche, autonomous complexes. This term may sound technical, but what it represents is something you have already felt in your skin, perhaps even yesterday without realizing it. Complexes are like little personalities within you. They are not poetic metaphors. They are complete psychological systems, formed by memories, emotions, images, and impulses that revolve around a core charged with affection. And when this core is activated, it not only influences, it takes command. Jung observed that a complex can arise from significant experiences, traumas, humiliations, rejections, unfulfilled desires, and once created, it takes on a life of its own. Think of them as islands, independent in the ocean of your mind, each with its own laws, language, and way of reacting. Your main personality may be calm, rational, balanced. But when a complex is triggered, that self is temporarily replaced by an other that reacts completely differently. And here's the most unsettling part. You don't realize when this happens. An innocent comment from someone can trigger a complex related to rejection, and suddenly you feel hurt, withdrawn, ready to attack or flee. A situation that reminds you of an old failure can awaken the complex of fear of not being good enough. And without thinking, you back away from an opportunity. It's as if there are secret buttons scattered throughout your life, and anyone who knows, even unintentionally, where to press can manipulate your reactions. Jung said that complexes are not necessarily enemies. They are parts of our psychic history, pieces of us that have become frozen in time, still responding as if they were living the same situation from the past. But the problem is that without awareness of them, you have no choice. You believe you are acting when, in fact, you are merely reacting according to an old script, written by events that you often don't even remember. Think about it. How many times have you sworn that next time you would act differently? And when the situation repeated itself, you fell into the exact same pattern. This is not a lack of willpower. This is a complex taking control. That's why Jung saw complexes as autonomous entities. They don't need your permission. They don't care about your plans. And they completely ignore the consequences. They just want to express themselves. The good news, and also the great challenge, is that these complexes can be recognized and with effort, integrated into consciousness. But this requires the courage to closely observe moments when you are not you, and to ask, who was in control just now? And it is exactly at this point that we love to talk about it in the next part. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Among all the fears that Jung identified, this may be the most treacherous because it does not present itself as fear. It disguises itself as prudence, common sense, as it's not the right time, as it's better not to take risks now. It is the unconscious fear of becoming who you really are. Jung called this process individuation, the path of discovering and living according to your true essence, the self. And he claimed that few people had the courage to follow it to the end. The resistance to individuation is like an invisible barrier built within you from an early age. Since childhood, you have been conditioned to fit in. Be good. Be polite. Don't draw too much attention. Don't speak loudly. Don't show vulnerability. Follow what everyone else does. Society, family, school, all contribute to shaping an acceptable, predictable, and safe identity. But safe for whom? Safe for the system, not for your soul. When you start taking steps toward individuation, whether changing careers, breaking off a toxic relationship, saying no where you once said yes, something within you awakens. It is a subtle yet profound panic. It's as if your own psyche screams, "Go back! You are straying from the safe territory." And here lies the trap. The safe is actually the territory where you live repeating old patterns, even if they slowly destroy you. Jung observed that most people prefer to live in the illusory comfort of collective conformity than to face the existential loneliness of being truly unique. Because taking control of your own life means giving up excuses. It means no longer being able to blame others, luck, fate, or circumstances. It is to take, before yourself, total responsibility for your own existence. And this weight, this absolute freedom, is unbearable for many. Have you noticed how much easier it is to follow a ready-made script than to write your own? It is easier to choose a safe career than to risk something you love. It is easier to maintain superficial friendships than to open up to deep and therefore risky connections. It is easier to identify with the group, whatever it may be, than to face the possibility of being rejected by everyone. The resistance to individuation feeds on this preference for the less threatening path. But the price is high. Each time you yield to this resistance, you drift further away from yourself. Your life becomes a poorly interpreted role, a character you play so well that sometimes you forget it is an act. On the outside, everything seems normal. On the inside, something dies a little more each day. And here is the cruelest part. This resistance does not work alone. It walks hand in hand with another powerful force that Jung described, an armor we wear to survive in the world, but which also becomes a prison. In the next chapter, we will explore this armor, the persona, and the deep fear that makes us live hidden behind it. To survive in the world, we all learn, from a very early age, to wear masks. These masks, which Jung called persona, are not necessarily lies. They are versions of ourselves shaped to meet social expectations. They are the self we show at work, the self we show to family, the self we show to friends, and even the self we show to ourselves when we look in the mirror. The persona is useful. It is like a social garment that protects us from direct judgment, helping us navigate situations where being completely authentic could lead to rejection or conflict. But this utility comes at a very high price. Over time, we begin to confuse the mask with the face. We forget where the performance ends and the essence begins. The problem is that the persona is not just a tool, it becomes a prison. Imagine living so long playing a role that one day you can no longer remember who you are outside of it. The fear of being rejected, criticized, or isolated makes us keep the mask glued to our face, even when it suffocates. We start to avoid situations where our true nature might slip through the cracks. We choose words that won't disturb, opinions that won't divide, behaviors that won't attract questioning looks. And deep down, we know we are betraying ourselves. There are moments when the shadow, all that we reject and hide, tries to emerge, asking for space to exist. But the persona, trained for years, quickly pushes it back into the dark. After all, showing the true self is risky. It means exposing oneself, allowing others to see our vulnerabilities, our contradictions, our complete humanity. And for those who have lived a lifetime relying on external acceptance, this risk is almost intolerable. Jung said that the danger of the persona is precisely this. When we identify too much with it, we lose the ability to differentiate what is real from what is performance. We begin to live in a way that maintains the image we created, even if it kills us inside. It's like living in a luxurious cell, beautiful, comfortable, but locked. And here lies the final trap. The more we cling to the persona, the further we drift from the self, and the more we feed the other two fears we have already explored. Because the persona, at its core, is an ally of the resistance to individuation and of autonomous complexes. It keeps the theater running, so that the audience never sees the truth. But behind all this mechanism, there is something even more unsettling. The way these forces come together, creating a state that Jung called psychological possession. It is not just you wearing a mask or yielding to a fear. It is something much greater, where every piece of your psyche conspires to ensure that you continue living a life that is not yours. And this is what we will unravel in the next part. So far, we have talked about three isolated forces: autonomous complexes, resistance to individuation, and the prison of the persona. Each of them, separately, is powerful enough to limit your life. But Jung observed something much more disturbing. They do not act alone. They intertwine, form alliances, feed off each other, and create a cohesive system that keeps you exactly where you are. It's as if they are pieces of an invisible mechanism, all adjusted to prevent any real movement toward freedom. Think of it this way. An autonomous complex is triggered by an emotional cue, a criticism, a painful memory, an unexpected challenge. This complex, charged with energy and memory, takes control and dictates your reaction. But before you even realize what has happened, the persona kicks in to ensure that this reaction does not reveal too much about you. It reorganizes your posture, your words, your tone, so that everything seems normal in the eyes of others. And if you try to resist and act differently, the resistance to individuation emerges as a voice whispering, "Don't do that. It's dangerous. You will regret it." This cycle creates a state that Jung called psychological possession. It is not possession in the supernatural sense, but in the sense that your consciousness is literally taken over by psychic contents that are not under your control. In those moments, you are not living. You are being lived. The decisions you make, the people you relate to, the opportunities you accept or decline, everything passes through the filter of these forces, which have only one goal: to preserve the internal status quo. And the cruelest part is that on the outside, everything seems to be functioning well. You continue working, taking care of your family, having fun with friends. But inside, you are trapped in an emotional and mental routine that repeats like a scratched record. With each attempt to change, the entire system mobilizes to pull you back into the same cage. That's why so many abandon the process of self-discovery. Because it is not just uncomfortable, it is actively sabotaged from within. Jung believed that when these three fears align, they become like guardians of an internal gate. Guardians that do not let you cross to the side where the true self resides. And they are not satisfied with merely blocking the passage. They create illusions to convince you that it is not even worth trying. They make you believe that you are in control, when in fact you are just moving within a limited and predetermined space. But here is the turning point. If you start to perceive how this system operates, if you can identify it in action, you can begin to weaken it. It is at this moment that something changes. When you stop being a victim and start being an observer of your own psyche. And from there, it is possible to initiate the process of deactivating this mechanism from the inside out. In the next part, we will talk about this path to breaking the cycle. We will explore how it is possible to expose these forces to the light of consciousness and gradually reclaim the control you always thought you had, but which you never truly possessed. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. If what we have seen so far seems bleak, it is because Jung was never afraid to look at the human psyche without filters. But he also believed that, no matter how deep the mechanisms of control of the unconscious were, it was possible to break the cycle. The key, however, is not to try to eliminate these forces. That would be impossible and, in fact, undesirable. They are part of you, your history, and your vital energy. The goal is not to destroy them, but to integrate them, becoming aware of what previously operated in the shadows. The first step is radical observation. This means developing a constant attention to your own thoughts, emotions, and reactions, especially in moments when you feel you have lost control or are repeating an old pattern. It is not enough to recognize it afterward. You must start to notice it during. It's like learning to hear a whisper in the midst of a crowd. At first, it seems impossible, but with practice, you begin to pick up subtle signals, a tightness in your stomach, a changed tone of voice, an automatic thought that arises uninvited. The second step is confrontation. This does not mean going to war with yourself, but being willing to face the discomfort that arises when the truth appears. When a complex is activated and you realize it, it is natural to feel anger, shame, or fear. But instead of fleeing, the invitation is to stay there. Look at that part as if it were a character lost in time, and ask, what are you trying to protect me from feeling? This simple question opens space for an answer that does not come from the rational mind, but from the unconscious itself. The third step is expression. Jung advocated techniques such as active imagination, dream journaling, and creative work as ways to give voice to what is hidden. It is not an artistic exercise in the traditional sense. It is a dialogue with what lives in the shadows. It is putting on paper, in images or words, that which finds no space in your daily life. This practice reduces the distance between the conscious and the unconscious, allowing repressed material to be processed and integrated. And perhaps most importantly, the fourth step is to take responsibility. Once you see the game, you can no longer play the victim of circumstances. Recognizing that part of your choices was guided by unconscious fears is not an excuse to continue repeating the same script. On the contrary, it is the turning point where you can say, "I see, and now I choose differently." This is the moment when individuation ceases to be a distant concept and begins to become a living experience. But be careful. Breaking the cycle does not mean you will never again be influenced by complexes, the persona, or internal resistance. It means that when they appear, you will know how to recognize them and decide whether or not to yield. It is the difference between being a blind passenger and being the driver who knows every curve of the road. And it is exactly here that the final stage of our journey comes in. How to keep this awareness alive in daily life, strengthening your inner autonomy and not allowing the shadows to regain control. This is what we will talk about in the next part. If you've made it this far, it's because on some level, you know that what we've discussed is not just distant theory or textbook psychology. It's about you. About the moments when you felt you were not in control. About the times you swore you would do it differently, but found yourself repeating the same pattern. About the choices you can't explain. The opportunities you let slip by, the relationships you maintained even knowing they were destroying you. It's about looking inward and recognizing that there are forces, invisible on the surface, but incredibly active, shaping your life. What Jung teaches us is hard to hear. As long as you don't bring these complexes to light, as long as you don't face the resistance to individuation, as long as you remain trapped in your persona, you will be living a role that is not yours. It may be a convincing role, even comfortable, but it is, at its core, a prison. And every day that passes without confronting this is another day yielding space for those forces to make choices for you. But there is something that no one can take away from you: the capacity for awareness. From the moment you start to see the mechanism, it no longer operates in the same way. It's as if, by turning on a light in the basement, the figures that once seemed like enormous monsters begin to reveal themselves for what they really are. Parts of you that got stuck in time, that need to be integrated, not denied. And this journey is not for the weak. It requires courage to face discomfort, discipline to sustain observation, and above all, the will to become whole, even if that means destroying the image you have built of yourself up to now. Now I want you to do something. Before you leave this video, stop and reflect. Which of the three forces we explored resonates most with your life at this moment? Is it a complex that dominates you without you realizing it? Is it the silent resistance that prevents you from following a more authentic path? Or is it the mask of the persona that you lack the courage to remove? Write in the comments, not for me, but for yourself, as an act of bringing to light what is usually hidden. And remember, this is just one step on a long and deep journey. There are more pieces of this internal puzzle that need to be revealed. In the next video, we will continue this journey, and I assure you it is important. I'll see you there.